Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've seen The Blue Angel, in the original German, Die Blaue Engel, which is...
Wow.
Yeah?
Your pronunciation is...
What's wrong with that?
So good. No, I'm just praising.
Der Blaue Engel. In my best Bavarian. 1930, German...
1929.
Oh, okay, well... release date April 30, it says here in Germany.
In Germany, okay.
Yeah, and December 30 in the US.
Right.
So...
Okay. Well, okay, that makes sense. I thought it was 29.
What's a year between friends?
Well, it's kind of important because, it's a sound film.
Yeah.
And I was going to make claims about, how astonishing it is that so early in the sound period, you get musical numbers like this and, so well integrated. But of course, the difference between 1929 and 1930 in that period is quite significant.
It's like a yawning chasm because things were developing so quickly.
Exactly.
It's half a comedy, half a drama, sort of tragic thing.
It's very tragic.
Mm.
Yeah.
What do you want to sort of explain?
Okay, well, it's about Professor Rath, R-A-H-T, who teaches in a high school or in a college, whose students poke fun at him, and he realizes that they're going to cabarets at night, and he's very stiff and moralistic and innocent, really. And so he goes to kind of catch them in the act, and in doing so, falls in love with Lola Lola, who is the star of, what is seen here to be as a kind of a louche, burlesque type of show, where kind of the women there are just, on display and selling their favors on the side. And the professor is so innocent that he falls in love with her, marries him, and in doing so loses his job, his social position, his career, and ends up a clown.
Yeah, the club is called the Blue Angel, where the title of the film comes from. His surname is actually Rath. R-A-T-H.
Well, that's pronounced right. And the students put a UN in front of it, which means garbage, so they're calling him Professor Garbage.
Yes, they call him garbage all the time.
Actually, all those scenes at the beginning with the students, I thought were kind of marvels of, how nasty and mean students can be.
Mm. You experienced anything like that?
No, well, I mean, not to my face. I'm sure, kind of behind my back, almost certainly.
You should have seen the pictures we used to draw of you.
Oh, don't tell me about it. I don't want to know.
He is extremely innocent and it is it's a very compelling combination of innocence and moralism, as you say. And when he, in the first couple of scenes where he goes to the club to try and catch his students, he ends up sort of behind the scenes, and Lola is sort of all over him. She knows what's going on. She knows, not all over him in that way, but like she knows sort of what the situation is, and she knows that he's out of place. Exactly.
And he doesn't. Though actually, I mean, one of the extraordinary things about this film is how impactful the presentation of Marlene Dietrich still is. Right? So you first see her in the postcards, and that incredible, historic, iconic, canonical image of, first the students and then the professor blowing up her skirt. I mean, that is one of the images of cinema. And then kind of to see her, right? And she's so bold in the film, right? And she's so insolent and at ease, right? So, I mean, I there's a bit where, she's bringing up her underwear, and she kind of, grabs her crotch like a man just to, to put her underwear at ease. Mm-hmm. That is still kind of, I've never seen anything like it, before or since this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, her ease with her own body and
her lack of
casual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And the knowledge that she has about the power that it gives her.
Yes.
Yeah. When he goes under the desk because he dropped all the cigarettes, and it's just him and her legs, and she makes a comment about,
"Are you coming up?
Send me a postcard." I think she says. But the film also, it's the film making use of that. So it's the film that composes it as him down there and just her legs, but her legs kind of say everything. You see a lot of that. You see a lot of her with her legs up on a chair. She's pulling her stockings up, things like that, and her legs are kind of they're this like the central sort of, they're the focus of the scene. There's a scene where she goes upstairs to her room, and she just lingers at the top of the stairs. So you just see her legs at the top of the frame, and she drops her knickers and drops them on him.
Yes.
And it's sort of it's like her legs are her character at that point.
I think the film also captures very much a sense of like, you know, palpable kind of sexual desire, you know, on not only on well, more on the part of the students than in fact on the part of the professor. Yeah, but it's kind of palpable how arousing and enticing, and it's like moths to a flame, like the song goes, right? But what I found most interesting about the film this time, well, many things actually. It's truly a great film. You know, one of the all-time greats. But it struck me that the film neither judges Unrat nor Lola Lola. Yeah, I mean, she is the way that she is, and you see her also kind of being, I don't know, quite wifey and maternal, and you know, along with cheating on him, or but kind of, I don't think the film judges her. She is the way that she is, and he is the way that he is, you know, and they probably should never have met, but but there's nothing wrong with the way that she is, and actually kind of there's a lot appealing in the way that she is in terms of the film's presentation.
Yeah, I think that's true. Do you think she's an honest person?
That's a good question, but it's a difficult one to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this whole conversation about a friend. So I was talking with a friend about another friend, and we were going on about how charming he is. He's an extraordinarily charming person, right? He always makes people good, and he always makes people feel better for having seen him, and so on. And yet, kind of, my friend was saying, well, but there's something deceitful about that, right? Because, you know, to charm is really kind of, you know, to seduce people, to get them to do things that they don't necessarily want, to make them feel, you're putting on an act and a face, and, you know, you're making yourself into something they will like. That's part of charming. And there's a kind of...
It's like salesmanship.
Yeah, there's a kind of dishonesty about that. So that's a difficult question to answer. She's charming, she's seductive, right? You know, she makes him feel good, and the most important now, you know, is that dishonest? You know, well, in a way it has to be, because you also see that she's with other men, but on the other hand, they've been together for 5 years, right? And, you know...
Yeah, well, the question it gives me is, why does she marry him?
Because he's a professor.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the answer I had. It's a status
thing.
But that then suggests that she is using him more than I think it comes across. That suggests that she's just using him for social status. I'm not really sure that's the case.
Well, I mean, I think this is what I would call a late Weimar film. Yeah, and I think, you know, in a country defeated by war, with rampant inflation, no food, blah, 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 kind of, you know, I think to want to marry a professor is, like, not a bad thing, right? And, I mean, certainly the professor's colleagues all know that he shouldn't, right? And I think kind of all of her colleagues understand why she should. You know, the irony is that they don't then retire into some small town where he continues to be a professor, but kind of continue with her act where she, you know, because the thing is, one of the telling lines in the film is, she supported you for 5 years, right? I mean, she could have chucked him out after he, you know, ran out of money, because there's that line, he says, you know, until I go, but, you know, my last cent, I won't sell these postcards. And then you cut and you see him selling postcards. Yeah. So he clearly ran out of money very quickly, right? And
and that thing at the end when when they make him the clown, there's a line about the first time you have to earn some money and you decide you don't want to, something like that. So she has been supporting him this whole time.
That's right. So anyway, the film makes both of them understandable, and interesting. Actually, I was very surprised this time, you know, because I always thought that what's the actor's name?
Emil Jannings.
Emil Jannings was such an old ham, right? And I've seen him in lots of films now. And then you also then wonder, like, are you seeing it in appropriate conditions? Because the thing about his performance here is that it is a bit florid, right? You know, but at each time you know what he's thinking. And what he's thinking is complex. I think it is really a great performance, right? Even though it's not an understated one, right? But actually, it's a performance that completely works for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt I was with him, you know, at his humiliations. It was unbearable, right?
It's very difficult to watch him as the clown at the end.
Yeah.
And he's constantly looking off screen left, even though he's on stage, and he's constantly, because she's off with this other guy, and he just can't pull himself away.
Yeah.
Can't pull his attention away.
And it renders it really tragic, right? Like, you know, I think it's really beautiful.
And it's a physical sort of visual degradation as well. That's what
Yes.
that's what the film depicts. Is he gives, as you said, like they don't retire into blah blah blah. It goes the other way. He ends up in the business and he is degraded and gives his life up to be humiliated for love.
Yes.
You know, I think I do totally understand why he marries her.
Yeah.
I still am left slightly with this question of why she marries him, or at least why she stays with him when his kind of status goes.
Well, because he's fond of him, and actually, you know, all of those lines at the beginning are, she can't believe, in a way, how sweet he is. And then actually you realize, well, he's a bit of a fool, right? He's not a man of the world. He's had a sheltered life. So, you know, but, I mean, she can't believe.
Well, see, it's funny, I took those lines when she was saying, "You're so sweet," I took those as part of her knowing the score and kind of understanding sort of what he wanted to hear, or just kind of slightly playing him.
Well, I mean, I get the feeling that both things are going on. You know, so she's used to playing men, right? You know, but men who come with money to fuck you, you know, don't bring you flowers.
Yeah,
right,
true.
and they don't propose marriage, you know. So I think there's a combination of, yes, she knows the score, but she hasn't heard this song before, really, you know. And so I think she is kind of charmed by that, and I'm sure a life of respectability, because there's that bit where he brings the ring, and she just can't stop laughing. The very idea that anyone would want to marry her, right?
There's a line that she has as well early on about how it's a long time since something, and it's in response to him being very sweet. Forget exactly what the line was, but it's a long time since someone bought me flowers, or a long time since something. Remember?
Yeah. Anyway, I understand why she marries him, and you know, particularly if you look at kind of, you know, the social structures of the time, or a time even possibly slightly before that. You know, it is kind of like a leap up the class structures, really. Plus, you know, kind of, I suppose, the expectation of money and security and whatever. Like, the thing is that in the film he gives all of that up, but, you know, kind of her attraction to him is purely about those things. It cannot be physical, right? So
well, that's very judgmental.
Anyway, I want to talk about the film's visuals.
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of the things that von Sternberg is considered really a master of is, you know, his framings, his compositions, his lighting, his mise en scène, you know, and I thought they were like, I mean, I don't know, I don't have all of his films in mind at the moment, but just seeing this film now, it strikes me how great all of those elements are in this film. So I can't say they're greater than The Scarlet Empress or, you know, Morocco or whatever, but they're certainly great, you know.
There's the one repeated shot that very much sticks in your mind, I think, which is the camera tracking back through the empty classroom.
Yes.
Which happens basically at the end of the first half, then at the end of the film.
Yes.
And I think it's the only track that the film uses. Apart from that, it's pans and tripod shots and things.
I think so. So you know, that last camera movement is beautiful. But actually, that's not what drew my eye most. What drew my eye most was the compositions. You know, so you often have like Marlene Dietrich on stage, and there's a bird hanging, you know, and just kind of, you know, the way that she's positioned in front of the camera. There's a lot of use of mirrors throughout, right? Kind of beautiful use of mirrors. Yeah, kind of constantly break up the frame. There's, those remnants, I guess, of German Expressionism, because when he's walking down the streets to find the Blue Angel Club at the beginning, it's almost like all the houses are bent into each other and all the shadows and so on. I thought that was, incredibly beautiful. The use of gauze, right? So at the end, when Professor Rath goes on stage, he comes through gauze. So, everything in the background is almost kind of out of focus moving, right? Mm-hmm. And he's in sharp focus. And there's a scene where Marlene Dietrich undresses that also uses the same kind of gauze, right? The constant use at the very beginning of the film, where things are planted for you. So the image of Lola Lola, which, that incredible opening shot where there's an old woman, who washes, there's a poster of Lola Lola, and then she throws water on it, right, and then begins washing it. I mean, that's kind of an incredible opening image. And then you see the posters of Lola Lola throughout, right, in her dressing room, on stage, like she's ever present, as he is trying to find his students and so, that image of her with her hands straddling her waist and open-legged, right, with a very skimpy top, right? I mean, that image circulates throughout almost all of the first half of the film, and you can see how he's enveloped by her, obsessed by her. Even when he's not yet conscious of her, she's there, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, all of those aspects of the mise en scène were just, like, mind-blowingly fantastic.
Very good.
Did you notice anything? Did anything...
I must say the shot that I noticed the most was that tracking shot that I mentioned, but also the her legs, as I mentioned, and it's partially the compositions that make use of her legs, and like I say, put them in those places and sort of make them level with him and that sort of thing. I think it's the fact that her legs, she's just got these beautiful legs that are on display all the time, and kind of the backstage is her domain. Yes. I mean, it's not like she also has them out on stage as well, but like backstage, she's completely in control, and her sort of her skimpiness of her clothes and her openness with her body is completely in contrast with him. I mean, he goes out with like 7 layers on.
Yes.
So you can see they're kind of like they're sort of firing nice. It's a shock to him and surprising, and to sort of surprising to be in that world. He is so out of place, and those kind of cutaways to him, sort of looking away and then looking back and looking away very nervously. Cut back to her taking whatever item of clothing off and kind of looking up at him with this knowing glance. I love that back and forth.
I mean, and she's always ready for action because, the skirts that she wears, like, kind of one of them is a skimpy dirndl type thing, but, the back is tied to her waist, i.e. so she's showing her panties. And the other one, which is a Marie Antoinette type dress, the front is fine, but the back is open for business, right? So, kind of all of that is kind of played, throughout the film as well. And of course, I think we mustn't forget to mention the songs, really, because, kind of they're all classic Friedrich Hollander songs. Falling in Love Again and Beware of the Blonde Whatever.
Beware of the Blonde Whatever, a classic.
Well, it's Beware of the Blonde Women or something, really. But we just, we heard it in German just now, so I can't quite remember. But anyway, the songs help tell the story. Like, they're completely integrated, you hear them throughout.
Those charming, alarming blonde women.
That's right. And one of the things that struck me, I mean, I've always known that cabaret was highly influenced by this film. There's that famous last song where Marlene Dietrich straddles the chair, right? And kind of, and then you have Liza Minnelli kind of doing her number on the chair in the Kit Kat Club. But what I hadn't quite registered until now, how all the Kit Kat Club scenes, what happens on stage, is influenced by the Blue Angel, right? So, in the Blue Angel, you have, a bear in cabaret you have a monkey. You know, the women drinking beer and being lined up like that, right? And kind of each getting up to their number and then sometimes dancing together. All of that, you know, the whole makeup of the stage is kind of, you know, taken from this film in ways that are very, very interesting. I was also struck by just people's bodies. So, you know, this is a film in which being fat is a good thing, right? It means you're prosperous, you have enough to eat, you're doing well in business, right? Unlike now, which is like the opposite. And also the women's bodies on stage, right? Like, you know, some of them are like really fat, right? And also like they don't have one shape. Some of them, you know, have you know, very small breasts, and you know, some of them are more full-figured, but they're completely different bodies to what we're used to seeing now as objects of desire, right? Because these women with these bodies are all on stage, to be desired, right? So,
although I think it does still make a joke on the fat woman at the start. You see, I forget exactly, but you see the men's reactions first, and they're kind of staring. Cut to, it's a head and shoulders shot of this woman who's much larger than the others, and I think that is making a joke on that.
Okay, but it's a relative thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, none of the women on stage, including Marlene Dietrich, you know, would now be considered like thin, you know. And in fact, Marlene Dietrich, when she made her next film in Hollywood, had a completely different shape. You know, she'd lost 30 pounds or something, you know, and the cheekbones came out, and, you know, and actually that was part of von Sternberg's either. She had to lose, you know, that weight, right? Because in Hollywood you had to be thinner than it was acceptable in Germany. So
yeah, and it made me think of Hustlers, actually.
Oh, really?
Well, you know what I mean. The dance scene,
yeah.
the dance scene that introduces J-Lo's character.
Yes.
And how different.
Yes.
I mean, in some respects, not that different. I mean, one of the things that has, I suppose, changed about the ideal woman's body in the last sort of 10 or 15 years is getting much bigger in some places.
Yes.
Kind of J-Lo and Beyonce, sort of big asses and thighs.
Yes.
Which, you know, wouldn't have been the case in like the 90s when it was more sort of Kate Moss or, you know, incredibly thin figures. So in some respects, there is some similarity there. But it still struck me as sort of this. I mean, the world obviously struck me as kind of similar in some ways. And there is this idea of sort of hustling men to some degree, but obviously the sweetness is very different.
Yes. And actually, I think, you know, it's a good comparison that you're bringing up, but I also think the comparison plays up, you know, how much greater the Blue Angel is, because the Blue Angel is harsher and grittier, you know, like it kind of. You know, again, just the Marlene Dietrich's stance, you know, her use of her body, right? Like, yeah, there's a kind of, you know, I mean, there are things that you don't see Jennifer Lopez do. Jennifer Lopez dances that dance, and she's made to seem like glamorous and agile and beautiful, you know, and distant. You don't have her scratching her crotch, you know, and kind of, you know, making sure that her, you know, her underwear are in position for the act. Like, there's a kind of a harshness to that, right? But also a kind of, you know, an insolence. And I imagine also kind of, you know, people found it immensely erotic. I mean, you know, kind of Marlene Dietrich was an erotic symbol for that generation, at least, right? And it's very much kind of due to this film, you know, and you can completely understand why. You know.
Yeah. You were saying that the film has a kind of even-handedness in not judging the characters for who they are.
Yes.
But we did still say it has this kind of overall tragic bent to it. And Emil Jannings' character, the professor, does lose things. He loses his lifestyle. He loses
everything.
Loses everything for love.
Yes.
And I would say it's more love than lust. You know, it's he obviously he does lust for Lola.
Yeah.
But I think the kind of overbearing thing you get from actually how much he loves her and falls for her.
Well, there are two things, right? Because he's clearly a man who can't distinguish between lust and love. You know, he's too pent up and old-fashioned and, you know, I don't know, Calvinist or whatever, right? That he can't make those distinctions. So, I mean, for him, to lust like that is to love.
Yeah.
You know. But then you do see, you know, that something develops, though, you know, in the end he tries to strangle her. You know, so, but I also think that what makes it you don't need to blame anybody. In fact, the tragedy of it depends on not blaming people, because in a way this is his fate. He can't help himself. Yeah, he can't help what he's done, right? And he didn't, you know, so there's this thing of, you know, both desire but also not knowing any better and being unsophisticated and kind of, you know, this is your fate. So I don't think you need to blame him or not blame him in order to appreciate the tragedy of it.
No. But do you think there is an association the film makes, a kind of classic association between drink, sex, clubbing, and sort of moral degradation?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, well, yes and no. Yes, if you are that kind of person, right? No, in itself, yeah. So, for example, you know, the students continue to be students, and you know, the other professors continue to be professors. Like, you know, it's actually his inability to tell lust from love that causes the tragedy.
So, do you think that the audience needs to, trying to think how to phrase it. Do you think that the tragedy doesn't depend on that kind of association? The tragedy more depends on the professor sort of not knowing himself or not knowing the difference and that sort of thing.
I think the tragedy depends on him being helpless. You know, I mean, he loses everything, you know, because, you know, of love, you know, and of loving the wrong person, really. So, and there's a romantic thing about that as well. Yeah, like, you know, he hasn't lost everything because he's killed someone. You know, he's lost everything for love.
Yeah,
a very kind of German kind of, you know, has a romantic dimension, really. You know, to die of love.
Very romantic, the Germans, famously.
Well, you know, the whole German romanticism kind of revolves around ideas like that. So, you know, on the one hand it's tragic, on the other hand there's a romance about it. You've given your all, you know, for love.
It's, the couple of references to Englishness struck me. I suppose they would. But, you know, so right at the start, in that lesson, they're talking about Hamlet and Julius Caesar. And there's this thing about... There was some reference to a kind of English kind of sweetness at one point, or something like that. It just struck me that the film seemed to have some slight idea of Englishness as romantic. Weird.
Well, I mean, I think until World War One, you know, I think kind of Germany and, you know, Britain were almost like twin nations, right? I mean, you know, kind of Queen Victoria's daughter, you know, married the Crown Prince of Germany. Her grandson was the Kaiser. You know, an educated person in the UK at that time would have learned German probably before French. You know, I mean, World War One changed everything. You know, and of course, you know, even before that, I mean, Hanover had been part of, you know, I mean, the kings of England had been kings of Hanover as well for 200 years previously or whatever. So,
yeah,
there are those links, you know, that kind of were ruptured by World War One, but that had been quite powerful until then, for historical reasons. You know, Prince Albert, blah blah. So
yeah, but that lesson on Hamlet focuses on pronouncing the word "the." Yes, "the" as opposed to "z."
Yes,
in a kind of in a sort of stereotypical German pronunciation. I don't know what sort of occurred to me. Yeah, it's got to be there for a reason.
Well, the reason is to show what a bad Professor Rath is.
That you just can't teach him properly. He's just insistent.
Because, I mean, you see, the child can't do any better, and he's not saying things like, if you place your tongue at the top of, you know, the roof of your whatever. He's just, you know, repeating it over and over again and treating the child like a fool, which obviously the child can't do any better unless you show him how to do it.
So, no, sure. But I mean, he could have taught him very badly in like a maths lesson or something else. The choice of Hamlet intrigued me. So, but I don't know.
Well, I suppose in a film like this, it would have its reasons. So, you're probably right, but nothing comes to mind.
No, nor to me either. But.
So, anyway, I think it's the film that made Marlene Dietrich a star. It was certainly cemented by her even greater success in Morocco with Gary Cooper, also by von Sternberg. It's one of the classic cycle of films, because Marlene Dietrich, when she went to Hollywood, she made all of her first films with von Sternberg. Shanghai Express, Morocco, The Scarlet Empress. I'm forgetting, something.
Her von Sternberg collaborations: Morocco, Dishonored.
Of course, Dishonored's fantastic.
Shanghai Express, Blonde Venus.
Blonde Venus is fantastic. That's where she wears the gorilla outfit.
The Devil is a Woman.
And The Devil is a Woman is the one set in Spain, and that was Dietrich's own favorite. So a whole series of classic films, one after the other, that kind of create this astonishing kind of imagery, all beautifully lit, and all kind of with, the potency of Dietrich's presence, which I think really hasn't been repeated in cinema since. See it.
It was very good, and lovely to see it on a nice big screen.
Yes,
as film should be.
Yeah, and a beautiful print as well. Actually, the light shimmered. Anything else?
Was it not digital? I'm sure it was the
I'm sure it was a digital print, but
projection.
The projectionist talked about a print because they had to reset the screen for the print. They were saying, right? So
who was saying that? I didn't. Was
the projectionist?
Oh right, yeah. I didn't hear anyone.
A customer had come in saying the screen wasn't set up right, and the woman behind the bar, mentioned it to the projectionist. So,
right, okay.
And that was the language that they used. Now it might be a DCIP print, rather than like a celluloid print. I don't think it was a celluloid print myself, but I think you now call those things a print, don't you?
I suppose so. Never really occurred. I suppose I would always just associate the word print with celluloid.
Yes.
But
probably yes. I don't think it was celluloid.
No, nor do I. But it looked very nice.
It looked beautiful. So highly recommend to see it. It really is striking to see it on a big screen. One of the things I just want to mention is it made me think of the differences between what you see now and the cinema of this period, and particularly in von Sternberg's hands, because even when you have close-ups of people, or two shots, or medium shots, right, the image is populated, right? So now you get like this relatively sparse imagery. If it's a close-up, there's a person in it, right? Whereas, when there's a close-up in von Sternberg, you're still seeing the gauze in the background, posters, sometimes even like 2 or 3 people kind of in the background. When you see scenes with more people, you're often seeing like 20 people, right, kind of in the frame, right? I mean, you really can tell that it's been designed to be seen primarily on a big screen. Yeah, in a way that even movies now, right? So if you think, for example, the last one we saw, which Ad Astra, like, it's almost like, in terms of the compositions, they could have been done for television. It is just Brad Pitt's face, right? And there's nothing else except his eyes or what he's feeling. Like, in this one, when you think of kind of, Marlene Dietrich, kind of, you're seeing everything that's around her, her dressing room, all the objects kind of lying around, and they're all significant,
Well, the other one we saw actually the day after Ad Astra is The Farewell, which I don't think it's similarly true of that.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
These are very basic compositions, as you said, and where, they fit what the film's doing, but they don't express a great deal, and they don't really fill the frame with very complex
imagery. Yeah. So
I always think about animals in old films weirdly, rather than the actors as being dead. There's a cat that jumps through the window, and if I see that in a film from 1930, I go, "Well, that cat's dead," as if the actors aren't.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting. Yeah, there are so many, like, so for example, one of the things that struck me again, seeing it again this time, is, of course, and you go, duh, why did you get that before? But, you know, when you're, like, all of the early scenes backstage, yeah, where Professor Unrat is kind of falling for her, or Professor Rath is falling for her, you know, there's always a clown present, you know, and he's getting, like, these longing looks and whatever. And you know, by the end of the film, you realize that clown at the beginning, you know, was probably her husband previous to this guy, or her lover previous to this guy, and he was reduced to that, and this guy's reduced to that, and the two things rhyme, right? So, you know, so again, in terms of what we were saying, you know, because initially, like, this clown is just a background figure. He's one of 4, 5, 10, you know, people that you see on stage, backstage, right? I mean, he does give glances back, so
he leaves an impression more so than others. Exactly. The others are just kind of girls who come back and forth. He's different.
Yes,
he has a notable presence, and he's constantly there, this sad clown figure that's always just looking on. And you're right, I mean, yeah, I forgot, the very same thing occurred to me by the end when Rat is turning into the clown. You go, oh, this is the same. This must be, you know, what happened with this guy, basically.
Yes.
And the guy that she is cheating on him with at the end, you go, well, he used to be that guy then.
Yeah.
You know, maybe.
Well,
maybe.
I don't think so. I mean, you know, my feeling was the first, you know, the clown at the beginning was her previous lover, and then, of course, you have Professor Unrat becoming, like, the next clown and being completely humiliated and doing his cock-a-doodle-doo, you know, which takes on this sad irony, you know, when he's completely defeated, you know, and he's made to kind of, you know, crow like a cockerel. So you have, like, these rhymes that are set into place by things that are seemingly not important at the beginning. It's really kind of great.
Yeah, it's definitely a film in two parts. You know, where the things in the first half, as you say, mirror or kind of reflected or kind of recapitulated in some sense in the second. And that shot that ends the first half and ends the film, I think, is part of that. And which is why that bit where that you mentioned about him doing the cock-a-doodle-doo, that to me was the hardest thing to watch, actually, in the final part of the film, because it's, you know, I think there is some association being made between sort of the world that he is now in and has been in for 5 years, and you know, moral degradation is too much, but he loses everything, so it's kind of there, and then he is dehumanized at the end.
Yes.
Forced to, it's the owner of the club, isn't it? Who's kind of going, just crow, will you?
No, it's the manager of the troupe.
Right, yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. The magician fella. Yeah. Owner of the troupe. And he, and that's really difficult to watch, actually.
But what's really complex and interesting in this film is that when he first crows like a cockerel is on his wedding day. Yeah, and you get the feeling that actually, you know, for the pent up, repressed professor to actually be able to do that is a kind of a release. It's something he's never done before, and you know, the thought of it is like thrills him. Yeah, you know, he's now a cockerel at his wedding, and then of course it rhymes kind of at the end. You know, so but in both instances, it's something that's foreign to him. Yeah, that's new.
But weirdly, I don't know if you feel the same way. When he does it on his wedding day, it felt to me as if everyone around the table, his guests, were laughing at him rather than with him. It's weirdly how it felt to me. Like he still was not in on something.
Oh yeah, well I think yeah, well I think
and at the end, really, it's supposed to get a laugh, but actually everyone just leaves. It's kind of, everyone goes there to see. It's all the people.
Everyone goes there to see him humiliated.
The troupe returns to the town where he came from, so everyone and it's sold as the professor's coming back. And
everyone goes there to see him humiliated and then can't stand seeing him humiliated.
Yeah.
It ends up being too much. And so I think those two things rhyme because he is slightly out of the know, right? But on the other hand, it's something, you know, that this professor who smokes too much and reads too much and, you know, lives this very limited life had never expected to experience. So, you know, the thing about his own thrill at it and kind of, you know, people kind of laughing at him because they're making fun of him doing this. they're not contradictory. I think they're part of the layers that the film has at each instance. But we really must stop now.
Yes.
So do see it if you get a chance. It's the 90th anniversary. It does very much feel like a film from another century. You know, it feels like a classic. It feels like a great work, but it does feel like a great work of another time, right? But nonetheless, kind of, you know, still speaks to us. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud and YouTube to listen to. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.